Good afternoon. Thanks for coming in. Most of you know me. My name is Cindy Hutter. I am the Human Resources Manager here at XYZ. I've been in Human Resources for about 12 years. I've done about 6 years in development of employee training programs and training materials. I've done about 4 years in development of policies and procedures. Here at XYZ, there's been a growing concern over the amount of resources that are being committed to post-employment litigation and settlements. At the request of our Vice President, Don Johnson, I've been asked to look into some remedies to see what we can do to reduce this exposure and reduce this expense. I've been doing research on the industry standards of employee performance management. Lawsuits have risen 400% over the last 20 years. According to a 2009 Bloomberg Law report, there's some startling federal statistics that have come out. The first of which, 6.5 claims per 1,000 employees. That's a lot of people out there trying to, quote unquote, get their share of the pie. Of those 6.5 out of 1,000, 16% of those are going to get settlements of over $1 million, and another 67% are going to get settlements over $100,000. That ends up being 87% of the people receiving some sort of compensation, and that does not even include attorney fees. The average compensation award is $490,000, and again, that's excluding punitive damages or attorney fees. The average cost to settle runs about $300,000, which has tripled over the last 5 years. Today we're going to look at a high-level overview of recommendation of course of action to reduce the post-employee compensation. The first thing we're going to look at is expectations. We want to make sure that everyone knows what good performance looks like. The next thing we're going to do is look at providing feedback. And we want to make sure that employees know where they stand at any given time. And then finally, we're going to look at documents. Document everything. In the event things go awry, documents are the saving grace. Documentation is the saving grace. Many cases are lost purely on poor documentation alone. So the first thing we're going to talk about is establishing expectations. This process starts before the hiring process even begins. We need to have clear, updated descriptions of all the positions. We want to utilize the hiring process to extensively evaluate potential employees. Use this time to your benefit. It's a time that you can secure the best suited candidates and set yourself and your employees up for success. We want to have ongoing regular check-ins, discuss current expectations. Each position is like a living being. It changes over time, and it's constantly going through change, and it constantly needs to be updated, reevaluated, and make sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to what the current expectations are and how the position's evolved. Next, let's talk about providing feedback. We want to provide timely feedback. It's just like with your pet. If your dog is chewing on the couch, it doesn't do much good to come back 2 or 3 days later and tell the dog that he's done something wrong. You need to address it right away. It's the same thing in the workplace. You need to give feedback in the moment. You need to be there talking to your people right away, letting them know what's going on, and don't let bad behaviors or incorrect behaviors persist. Next, we'll talk about honest feedback. Good or bad, you need to do it. You need to address the right and the wrong things that they're doing. It's easy to avoid the bad stuff, to avoid the confrontation, but it's not beneficial to you and it's not beneficial to your employees. Those times are opportunities for you to develop your employees. And rather than turn them into an exiting employee, you can help them to grow within your organization and keep them and actually benefit from the resources that you've put into them. And let's focus on behavior. Behavior feedback should be behavior-based. You should use objective terms. Describe tasks. Don't use terms that evoke emotions or opinions. For example, in a performance review, you could say, Tom's not a team player. Well, it's kind of a vague statement. It doesn't really say what Tom did or what he needs to do to improve. So a better thing might be to say, well, Tom actually did this and it affected the team in this way. In other words, did Tom turn in some project late, which made it so that the rest of the team could not get their stuff done on time either. So that would be a good example of team playing and not being good at it, but you're describing the behavior rather than a vague statement about Tom being a team player. You're actually getting it down to what those behaviors were and what he needs to do to correct them. And last, we want to be consistent. We want to be consistent in the way that we approach our employees. If they do something one day, it's got to be treated the same the next day or any other day. So if it's wrong today, it's wrong tomorrow, it's wrong next week. If it's good today, it's good all the time. And we want to make sure that we're not giving them mixed messages by allowing something one day but then coming down on them for it another day. And we also want to be consistent in the way that we treat all of our employees. In other words, what's good for one is good for all. You don't want to single certain employees out and give them special treatment, good or bad. You want to make sure that you're consistent across the board and that you're treating everybody the same way. And then we get down to documentation, which perhaps is the most important part of this whole process. Without documentation, you have no policy. If you have a well-documented handbook that sets policy and expectations, you'll go a long way in knowing what your employees knowing what's expected of them, but you also have something to back up any expectations that you've placed on them, so that if something does go bad, you can fall back on this documentation, whether it's in a corrective action situation or even in court. You can say, well, this is the policy, it applies to everybody, and this is what they were expected to do. They signed for it, they read it, and there it is. The next thing we have is documenting performance. Documenting performance serves several purposes. It allows you to organize your thoughts, it allows you to script your conversation that you're going to have with somebody, and it also lessens the confusion. And it provides evidence in the case of post-employment litigation. If you have the documentation, you can bring that in and show that, look, this is what we've talked about, we discussed this, and this is how it was supposed to go. Keep a log. Keep a log of all the great things that your employees have done, and keep a log of the things that they haven't done that well. And what that will do is it's a great tool to ensure accuracy and completeness when you do your annual reviews or even your quarterly reviews. And when somebody's done something several months ago and you're trying to document it, you're really not going to remember the details, or in fact you may not even remember it at all. You want to be able to put dates and specific actions and what those actionable items caused or what they did. You want to make sure that all those things are documented in your performance reviews. In summary, the high-level overview of building a plan to relieve some of our post-employee costs are establishing clear expectations, providing timely and constructive feedback, maintaining detailed records, both establishing expectations as well as documenting behavioral performance. And now I'd like to give some time for some questions.
What do you keep a log on all of your employees, and what do you do with all those logs?
We do keep a log on each employee, and the general rule is that if you've used that information for review purposes, once that review is done, you can get rid of the log. And the theory behind that is that if If you've put the information in the review, you've got it documented in the review, so you don't need it documented in the law anymore, in the log anymore. And if you didn't put it in the review, well, then it must not have been that important. And you're not going to go back 2 or 3 years later and say, oh, you missed some time on this time, so now we're gonna hold you up on that back here 2 years later. It kind of doesn't work that way. So once you've gone through your review period, you can pretty much release those logs and go ahead and destroy those.
Thank you.
You have documentation up there. I was just wondering, what's the percentage of lawsuits that are lost because of either poor or lost documentation?
That's a great question. I don't have those percentages with me today, but it's definitely something that I can get for you. I have it in my research notes, and I can get that to you. I can send that out to you, and anybody else who would like that information, I can go ahead and send it out to all of you, just to let you know what those numbers are and how important documentation is and how it affects the way that we do business and the way that we have our hiring policies set up.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It was very informative. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, I want to thank you for your time. I know that you're very busy, and thanks again for coming in.
Thank you.